Imagine waking up one morning, checking the news on your phone, and discovering that the highest court in the country has just made a decision that could change the way gun laws work in every single state in America. Not a close decision, not a divided court, a unanimous ruling, 9 justices, all in agreement. And when that happens in a case involving gun rights, it sends a shockwave through the entire legal system. That is exactly what just happened. The United States Supreme Court has issued a 9-0 decision that is already beginning to reshape how gun laws are interpreted, enforced, and challenged across the country. If you own a firearm, carry one, plan to buy one, or simply care about the future of Second Amendment rights, this ruling matters to you right now. What makes this moment so important is not just the decision itself, but the ripple effect it is about to create. Laws that have existed for years, sometimes decades, could suddenly be questioned. Legal arguments that once failed in court may now succeed. And prosecutors, lawmakers, and judges across the nation will now have to rethink how they approach gun legislation. But before we unpack what this ruling really means and how it could affect everyday gun owners, take a quick moment to subscribe if you haven't already. A huge percentage of gun owners miss critical legal updates simply because they never hear about them until it's too late. This channel exists to break complicated legal decisions down into plain language so you can stay informed, stay protected, and most importantly, stay on the right side of the law. Now let's talk about what actually happened. The Supreme Court just issued a unanimous ruling in a case that originally began in a single state but now applies nationwide. When the court rules unanimously, it sends an especially strong message because it means every justice, regardless of political background or judicial philosophy, agreed on the outcome. That almost never happens in cases involving the Second Amendment. Yet this time, the court spoke with one voice. The decision focuses on how states create and enforce gun laws and, more specifically, how prosecutors use those laws when charging someone with a firearm-related crime. While the individual case involved a person accused of illegally possessing a firearm under state law, the deeper issue was much bigger than that one situation. The court was asked to clarify the constitutional standards that gun laws must meet, and the answer they gave is already forcing lawmakers and courts across the country to reassess thousands of existing regulations. To understand the full impact of this ruling, we have to go back to a previous Supreme Court case from a couple of years ago, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. That earlier case introduced a powerful new standard for evaluating gun laws. The court said that firearm regulations must be consistent with the historical tradition of gun regulation in the United States. In simple terms, if a modern gun law does not resemble regulations that existed around the time the Second Amendment was written, the law may not be constitutional. That principle alone reshaped the legal landscape. But this new 9-0 ruling goes even further by reinforcing and strengthening that historical test. The Supreme Court has now made it unmistakably clear that governments cannot simply invent new gun restrictions without historical support. Every state, city, and local government must be able to show that their regulations have roots in the nation's historical tradition of firearm laws. If they cannot prove that connection, the law is vulnerable to being struck down. Think about that for a moment. This standard doesn't just apply to future legislation. It applies to laws that already exist today. Regulations that have been enforced for years are now open to legal challenge if they cannot pass the historical test. That means the legal foundation of thousands of gun laws is suddenly being questioned. Restrictions involving where you can carry firearms, how you can carry them, what types of weapons are allowed, and even certain storage requirements may now face new scrutiny. Let's imagine a practical example. Suppose a state law prohibits carrying firearms in public parks. Under the old system, courts might have allowed that rule to stand if lawmakers argued that it served public safety. But under the Supreme Court's current standard, the state must show evidence that similar restrictions existed during the founding era or shortly afterward. If historical records don't reveal comparable laws, the modern restriction may not survive a constitutional challenge. Another example involves concealed carry permits. Some states once required applicants to demonstrate a special need or a specific threat before they could obtain a permit. In other words, people had to prove they had a unique reason to carry a firearm. The earlier Bruin decision already ruled that such requirements violate the Constitution. The new ruling strengthens that conclusion by reinforcing the historical test and making it harder for states to justify similar policies in the future. For everyday gun owners, the implications are enormous. If you have ever been denied a carry permit, restricted from carrying in certain places, or charged under a questionable firearm law, this decision could significantly strengthen your legal position. Courts must now ask a very specific question. Does the government have historical evidence supporting this regulation? If the answer is no, the restriction could be unconstitutional. And because of that, legal challenges are already being prepared across the country. Gun rights organizations are lining up lawsuits aimed at some of the most restrictive states in the nation. Places like California, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Massachusetts have complex firearm regulations that critics argue lack historical precedent. Those laws could now face renewed legal scrutiny. We are talking about potential challenges to assault weapon bans, magazine capacity limits, red flag laws, and restrictions on where firearms may be carried. Some of these challenges will succeed, others may fail. But one thing is almost certain. The number of lawsuits will increase dramatically over the next year. The ruling also changes the environment for criminal prosecutions. In the past, prosecutors often focused solely on proving that someone violated a specific gun law. Now, defense attorneys may challenge the law itself, arguing that it fails the Supreme Court's historical test. If a judge agrees that the regulation lacks historical backing, the case could collapse before it even reaches trial. That possibility alone could lead to more dismissed charges and more successful defenses for gun owners. There is another important aspect of the decision that deserves attention. For years, some courts relied on a method called interest balancing. Judges would weigh the government's interest in public safety against an individual's right to keep and bear arms. If the government's safety concerns seemed compelling enough, the court might uphold the restriction. The Supreme Court has now rejected that approach. According to the court, constitutional rights cannot simply be balanced away based on policy arguments. Instead, judges must rely on historical analysis when determining whether a firearm regulation is valid. This marks a major shift in how Second Amendment cases are evaluated. Of course, this does not mean every gun law will disappear overnight. The Supreme Court has acknowledged that certain restrictions have historical support. Laws preventing convicted felons from possessing firearms, for example, are likely to remain in place. Regulations banning firearms in specific sensitive locations, such as courthouses, may also survive constitutional review. But the key difference is that governments must now demonstrate a historical foundation for those restrictions. They cannot simply declare new categories of prohibited places or prohibited people without evidence that similar rules existed in the past. Now let's talk about timing, because this is where things become especially interesting. The decision was issued very recently, which means we are only beginning to see its effects. Over the next 6 to 12 months, legal experts expect a wave of litigation across the country. Some cases will challenge long-standing laws. Others will target newly enacted regulations. Different courts may interpret the historical test differently at first. Some judges may require very specific historical evidence. Others may accept broader comparisons to past regulations. Because of those differences, conflicting rulings are almost inevitable. Eventually, some of those disputes will likely return to the Supreme Court for further clarification. In the meantime, the legal landscape surrounding firearms will remain dynamic and evolving. So what should gun owners do right now? First, stay informed about legal developments in your state. Lawsuits challenging firearm restrictions could directly affect your rights. Second, if you have been denied a permit or charged with a firearm offense, consult a qualified attorney as soon as possible. This new Supreme Court ruling may open legal arguments that were not previously available. Third, keep educating yourself about the changing legal environment. Understanding your rights is one of the most powerful tools you have. The reality is that gun laws in the United States are entering a period of rapid change. What was legal yesterday may be challenged tomorrow. Regulations that seemed permanent may soon disappear, and new legal precedents will continue to shape the conversation about the Second Amendment. At the same time, It is important to remember that this video provides educational information, not legal advice. Every case is different, and anyone facing a legal issue should consult an attorney familiar with the laws in their state. Here's the bottom line. The Supreme Court's unanimous decision has strengthened the constitutional standard protecting firearm rights. By reinforcing the historical test established in earlier rulings, the court has made it more difficult for governments to impose new restrictions without clear historical justification. For supporters of the Second Amendment, this represents a major victory. But it also signals the beginning of a new legal chapter rather than the end of the story. Lawmakers who favor stricter gun control will likely search for historical evidence to support their regulations. Others may attempt to craft new laws designed to pass the court's test. Meanwhile, gun rights advocates will continue challenging regulations they believe violate constitutional principles. The result will be a legal battle that unfolds in courtrooms across the country. For gun owners, the most important thing is awareness. Know the laws where you live, follow legal developments, and understand that the interpretation of the Second Amendment is still evolving. If you found this explanation helpful, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future updates. The next few months could bring even more significant court decisions and legal changes affecting firearm rights. Share this video with friends or family members who own firearms or are interested in the future of gun laws in the United States. Staying informed is one of the best ways to protect your rights and avoid legal trouble. And if you have thoughts about how this ruling might affect your state, leave a comment below. Hearing from viewers helps guide future videos and highlights the issues that matter most to this community. Thanks for watching, thanks for being part of this conversation, and as always, stay informed, stay responsible, and I'll see you in the next update.